What we have so far said about the CARVAKAS goes against everything that is taught in schools and colleges and written in the textbooks. It simply shows that the authors of the textbooks and the teachers who recommend them are not aware of the research that has done in the last 50 years or so. Some radical departures from the old tradition has already taken place. Only the textbook writers in India are blissfully unaware of all this. There was a Japanese scholar Mamoru Namai, a scholar from Israel who now is in Germany, Eli Franco, and many others have done very significant works on the Charvaka Lokayata. One Italian scholar, Dr. Krishna del Toso, has also explored the Tibetan sources and brought out some very interesting evidence. All this goes to show that the Charvaka was a serious philosophical system. It was also known as Lokayata, and simple hedonism, hedonism without any restraint, was not at all a part and parcel of this system. Be that as it may, the general, I should say, misconception about the Charvakas seems to persist simply because our authors who write for the general people, the lay people, don't update themselves. And that is why it is necessary to reiterate what the Charvakas actually meant. What exactly the Charvakas did was to deny the validity of what in the Indian philosophical tradition is called aptovakya or shabdo, verbal testimony. In every other system of philosophy excepting Buddhism, aptovakya or the word of a trustworthy person is always accepted as a means of knowledge. Whether the person is actually trustworthy is not always judged, which is why the idea of the trustworthy person is rather incomplete and vague. But even when the word of the trustworthy person is taken into consideration, it has to be questioned first. As the Sanskrit saying goes, Muni nancha muti brahmaha. Even the sages are subject to mistakes. They too make errors. This is what the Charvakas knew very well, and that's why the Charvakas and the Buddhists accepted only perception and inference to a certain extent by the Charvakas, as a whole by the Buddhists, and nothing else as a pramana, means of knowledge. The radical nature of the Charvaka philosophy is found in this particular rejection of aptovakya, the words of a trustworthy person as a means of knowledge. The whole of the Indian way of life is based on the Shastras, what is called Dharma Shastra, Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra and the like. Now, the Shastras are written by human beings. The Veda, which is considered to be above all Shastras, are generally by the Nayayikas, the Neo-philosophers, considered to be written by God, and by the Mimamsakas, otherwise intelligent people, very intelligent people, called it apaurusheo, not composed by any human. This is absolutely unbelievable, but the Mimamsa philosophers insisted on this apaurusheo, not composed by any human, this character of the Veda. And everywhere human life of the Hindus particularly were guided by what is called Sriti Shastra. What the Shastras like Manu Sangita, Parashara Sangita, Yajnavalkya Sangita and the like say. Later on, these masters were forgotten or largely forgotten, and local leaders who laid down the rules of life, of marriage, of birth and all that were considered to be the apto, the persons who are trustworthy. In Bengal, for example, there was Raghunandana. Raghunandana Bhattacharya, the author of 28 works, all dealing with the walks of life in which human beings have to get into. And they were all accepted without any question, without any real query why and how these rules came to be observed. The Hindus had a tradition of performing 10 rituals, Dashakarma, and they were all guided by the priests. What the priests advised had to be done, and that is how the Hindu way of life had been either priest-ridden or ridden by the Shastras. The Buddhists and the CARVAKAS were somewhat exceptional in this respect. They did not accept the Shastras to be of any significance as to the realization of truth. The whole tradition of Indian philosophy depends on the Veda on the one hand and the rites to be performed according to the Vedas on the other. People don't read the Veda, they don't even know what the Veda is. But this is a word that carries enough respect to subdue anybody who challenges it. As challengers, the Buddhists, the Jains and the Charvakas are in one line. They came out against the idea of accepting the Veda as the ultimate truth. The Buddhists and the Jains, of course, were having a religion of their own. The Charvakas had no religion at all, and that is why the Charvakas were considered to be the common enemy of all the religions, not only Hinduism but also Buddhism and Jainism. Please remember that Buddhist philosophy and Buddhism as a religion are largely two different propositions. Buddhist philosophers were actually more interested in ascertaining how truth is to be achieved. With them, the nature of inference was more important than anything else. And the Buddhists also, whether in the field of religion or in the field of philosophy, were the first to promote the idea of causality. They called it pratitya samutpada, conditional rise. It has been translated into various ways. Raul Shankritayana, for example, preferred to call it discontinuous continuity. Some others have called it concatenation of cause and effects. In whatever way you take it, this was a signal idea that the Buddha had preached to his disciples. So very much like the ethical idea of the eightfold way, Ashtangika Marga, this too was one of the major contributions of Buddhist thought. To this I would like to add this rejection of Aptabhakya or Shabda Praman, the idea of everything can be learned from the Vedas and everything can be learned from the Sriti Shastras, and what they say are absolutely correct. There can be no violation of them. This is what the Charvakas actually opposed, and this opposition made them the enemies of the religious orthodoxy. When we read the fragments of the Charvakas, the fragments, although fragments, are enough to convince us that they were a set of thinkers who never cared, I emphasize, never cared for any aptobakko. They only believed in reasoning, they believed in actual perception, and that is how the Charvakos came to be regarded as the only truly non-Vedic philosophical system in India. The Buddhists were there, so were the Jains, but they together were connected with two other religious systems. With the Charvakos, there were none. And that is where the Charvakos stand alone, and at the same time the common enemy of all religious and superstitious people.